Welcome to this week in the world of wrestling.
Welcome to TWitWoW, the best wrestling podcast made for wrestling fans, by wrestling fans, on the web today. I'm John, that's my cohort and commentary Ashton, and this is our Monday Night Raw review. And I gotta say, for the season premiere of Monday Night Raw, which they use that notion quite a lot on this show, I rather enjoyed it. I thought we had a fantastic cage match between Jericho and Bray Wyatt. Some solid build towards the Night of Champions. A few nitpicks here and there, but nothing really offensive on my end, and just an all-around, just really enjoyable 3 hours of Raw. Nothing super spectacular, but certainly better than the last few weeks. Ashton, what'd you think of it?
I agree with you 100%. This show was not perfect by any means. There were a few segments that were just flat out cringeworthy, and I ended up changing the channel and watching football instead. But believe it or not, despite the fact that I watched football, I went back after Raw and the football game, which, I mean, I watched both football games, and they ended up ending at like 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning here. So after that was done, I went back and I ended up rewatching Raw, and I realized, wait a minute, I didn't actually miss that much. As it turns out, I actually caught most of, like, probably 85% of Raw, despite the fact that anytime something stupid came on, I would change it to football. So apparently it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it's funny because I was reading certain reviews from the show, and I remember one person said if you skip past like all the Bella segments and I guess other segments that they deemed crap, the show actually progresses a lot quicker, and you'll find you really didn't miss that much. So it's interesting that you say that. So
absolutely. All right, dude. Do you want to get into our first segment?
Yeah, heat of the night, and I have 0 heats of the night tonight. Nothing really offensive on the show. Maybe I'll have a few nitpicks which I'll address later, but for the time being, nothing that I really want to hash out here. So I pass the ball to Ashton. Do you have any heats of the night tonight?
I have 0 heats of the night, but I do have 2 nitpicks, one of which is a Divas thing, which is why it can't be here tonight, otherwise it would be.
Right, okay, so let's have at it.
Okay, my first legitimate nitpick, and the reason this isn't a heat of the night is because this is me legitimately just straight up being nitpicky and being probably too critical of a wrestling fan, but I have a problem with the fact that Chris Jericho's quote-unquote send-off was a cage match. And the problem that I have with this is, if you know that you are going to be using Bray Wyatt to, I suppose, write Chris Jericho off TV, why would you not give Bray Wyatt legitimacy? Give him the credibility that comes with an actual pinfall victory, rather than putting him in a cage and having the Wyatt family have to end up interfering, and then he ends up winning by escaping the cage, and even then it was only just barely. It just felt like they're trying to put forward the idea that Bray Wyatt isn't really that much better than Chris Jericho. And in my opinion, if you're writing Chris Jericho off TV, you need to make Bray Wyatt look dominant over him, and you don't do that by having him just barely escape the cage before Chris.
Now, this is an interesting point, because I really find myself struggling to contend with your view, despite the fact that I do stand by what I said with my opening sentiments, and that's that I do believe that this was a fantastic cage match.
No, dude, I'm not trying to contend the quality of the match. It was a good match. I just dislike the fact that this match was the kind of match that it was to begin with.
Right. And see, like, that to me, in one way, I could understand why they did have a cage match, because I think when you have any kind of rivalry, and it was the third match in this rivalry, they probably want to give it its own unique identity, make it stand out from the prior
street fight
bouts. And that could have worked as well. Really, any stip that you give a feud like this, I feel like could have worked. But they chose the cage, so,
And you know what?
Go.
I could have even forgiven the cage if Bray would have won by pinfall, which is possible.
Right, absolutely. One thing I do have to commend this match for, though, compared to the last cage match that Bray Wyatt was involved in, the shenanigans were really shaved down to a minimum because the Wyatt family only got involved one time, and that forced Chris Jericho to do a crossbody off of the cage, which I thought was a pretty sick-looking spot. Worried about Jericho there for a second, but then, as you pointed out, it just seemed like he was really milking whatever he did to his knee. So, there was that. But as far as the actual finish, it's difficult because Bray Wyatt, we've talked about this before, Ashton. This is a character that should be dominant. This is a character that should be what he says he is, and that's an eater of worlds, just tearing everything apart. But lately, it seems like he's so average, or dare I say even subhuman, in the way that he comes about his victories. These aren't the type of victories you'd expect a man in his position to take. Really, I'm surprised they wanted to send Jericho out looking that strong. I don't know if maybe he'll come back later this year.
It's confusing, right? Like, why are you even bothering? Even if he would come back later this year, all it takes is for him to show up, and he's immediately over, regardless of how he left.
Right, which is why, like, compared to his last few returns, this one was one of the more intriguing ones because of, I think, the conscious effort they put into his booking. I mean, he actually did get a win over Bray Wyatt. He was in the mix with Randy Orton, the Authority, and certain top-level guys at certain points, just to pass time along, I guess, on his contract. So the things that he did during his time were very interesting. And, yeah, even though he did lose this match, he lost by a hair. Like, you really couldn't say that Jericho was dominated by any means, because even the finish, really illustrated, because Bray targeted the knee, and because Jericho was focused on, easing that pain, Bray was able to slide out of the cage. Bray escaped through the door. He didn't even escape over the top. He escaped through the door, and Jericho was right there. They were fighting for control. So to make Jericho seem that dominant even in defeat, even though he sustained a post-match beatdown as well at the hands of Bray Wyatt, I just don't understand it. I'm not looking for Jericho to get mauled here again. I love the bout that they had, but Bray should have had the kind of finish that he should have with Jericho, is the kind of finish that he had, and we use this example because it's still the best one to date, against Daniel Bryan at Royal Rumble. Maybe one Sister Abigail into the cage wall, and then another one in the center of the ring for the pinfall victory. That's an exclamation point. Here, it's like he got by the skin of his teeth. And that is something – that's what the people facing Bray Wyatt should be doing, not Bray Wyatt himself.
Yeah.
It's really backwards to me.
I agree. And that's kind of the point that I want to make here, is that, it's one of those things where I think that – since the WWE fed Bray Wyatt to John Cena, they have, and I hate to kind of pull off the whole circle Jericho, we are always right kind of thing, but I was right on this. There was nowhere for Bray Wyatt to go after John Cena. John Cena is the tip of the mountain, so unless Bray's going after Brock afterwards, there was nowhere for him to go but down. And I think that his downward spiral has been on the same level, maybe not quite as significant, but similar to what Ryback's was. Ryback was on the top of the world. He got fed to the John Cena monster, and next thing you know, he was jobbing to Chris Jericho. My knee popped, or I heard something pop and it wasn't the crowd. And next thing you know, he was in an irrelevant tag team, and now he got hurt, but still, it took how long in the tag team that he was in for him to finally start getting the crowd reaction back. I don't want to see that happen to Bray. And it seems like he's going down the exact same path as Ryback, because he went from Cena to Jericho just like Ryback did.
Yeah, I hate to say it, because I remember being very contentious with you when you first brought it up, but I have to concede now that we're here, you were right. To me, there was only one way they could have avoided this to me, but then I think that would have had its own risks. But personally, I had enough faith in Bray that he could have pulled it off. I still say he should have won the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at Money in the Bank. I still say that, because I think after losing to Cena, and then he cuts that magnificent promo about how it wasn't a loss, it was a rebirth because everything came into perspective for him.
Yep.
And that should have been the time, if everything really came into perspective for him, that he would have kept the family, because I love the trio. I love the act. I do. It's one of my favorite things going right now. But he would have sent him to the back during his matches. He would have always invited him back for post-match beatdowns, and he would have dominated everybody. Money in the Bank, you have him win the ladder match, go on a tear, and, you know, I'm not saying that we could have saved him if Bryan hadn't gotten injured, because, to be honest, Bryan probably would have gotten his win back over Bray, and Bray would probably still be here. He probably would have just had one extra pit stop or two at best. But it's just a shame that you have a character this brilliant, that's so engaging and so intriguing and inviting to audiences, that Forbes wrote 2 pieces on him about how he was one of the best things to come along in wrestling. And this is the kind of commentary we're having on him now.
Yeah.
It really sucks. And look, you know, Ash, and you've made this point before, and I want to make it known to our audiences, this is not me entirely anyway having sour grapes of, oh, you know, he should be a world champion, because we've discussed multiple times, not every great career has a world title attached to it. Ask Jake Roberts, ask Roddy Piper.
Yep.
But you know what? There was never a time, at least in the moments that I've experienced of both of their careers, where they felt somewhat irrelevant or they felt somewhat under the radar. And that's kind of where Bray's feeling right now, because now that Jericho's gone, with everything going on with the Authority and Brock Lesnar, and heck, I hate to say it, Ashton, I hate to be hyperbolic, but I'm going to be honest, even the things going on with the Bella Twins seem like they're on a higher priority than Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family. Mm-hmm. That's not a knock against the product, because I'm enjoying it. It's just an observation I've been having. It's really sad. But see, the only optimism I have, and I do want to end on a good note, I do, is that I think Bray and the family, the kind of act that they have, is one that it really wouldn't take that much effort or that much creative ingenuity, so to speak, to get back on track. I just think you just need the right opponent, the right program, and strong booking, which is what this last bout lacked, because as we said, you know, the whole escaping the cage thing. And I think he'd be right back in it, because the crowd, I think, still wants to be into him. They just need a reason to continue to stay on board. So,
right. Yeah.
Pretty
much. I'm not going to contend what you said, because most of what you just said is pretty much in agreeing what I said. I think that the WWE needs to work on because I think that they have this problem where they feel like if they aren't pushing somebody at the moment, it doesn't matter if they look weak, because they can kind of restore their credibility in a heartbeat, because it's the WWE and they can do whatever they want. And I do think that has a little bit of credibility to it, but you need to learn how to protect certain guys. I mean, just imagine if, say, Nick Dinsmore had stuck with the company, and this is a guy who has legitimate talent. If they would have tried to repackage him as anything other than Eugene, he would have been laughed out of the building. Same with Santino. If they would have tried to repackage him as something other than a comedy gimmick. All I'm trying to say is there's only so much you can do to repair somebody's credibility and reputation after you've driven it down to a certain level. And I'm not saying that Bray's is down that low, but I also am saying that I don't want to see his get down that low.
You know, Ashton, I find WWE to be in a very fascinating period at the moment, and I've noted other wrestling fans have said this, because I feel like WWE has some of the best talent on their roster that they've had since, for me personally, of course there's going to be bias there because I grew up in the era, since the Ruthless Aggression era. But
well, I mean, dude, there's nobody trying to question that the post-buyout era of the WWE was the era where they had the talent, the most talent on their roster. And it's because there were basically 2 rosters. So they could literally just pick and choose all of the most talented, or the people with the most upside, or the people that they thought they were going to be able to draw the most, and keep those guys and kind of trim the fat, so to say. Just kind of let the other guys go to the wayside.
Right, but I feel like this is a period where they have such amazing talent. And I'm talking both NXT and the guys on the main roster, but it seems to coincide also with a period of just really frustrating writing. I don't want to come out and say outright awful because I think that would be disingenuous, but it hasn't been consistently brilliant either, even with our most beloved characters that we love talking about each and every week. It's almost like WWE does trade-offs. Rather than giving us all this excellent stuff at once, it's just one at a time. They can't multitask. They can't multi-build. It's like, oh, well, since Bray Wyatt's on a decline, and I know you guys are miffed about that, let's put a championship on Ziggler, which has made me very happy. And I was very happy to see him have a segment on Raw this week, which we'll get to later because I thought it was very entertaining. But it's like WWE can't multi-concentrate their efforts. It's like one project at a time. And it seems like they're quick to abandon that project either if something better comes along or if it's not reaping the results on the timetable that they set forth, which is frustrating, because I think that's just not a healthy model to have for a business like pro wrestling, because the crowd is the ultimate determinant of where every project, so to speak, ends up. And, the crowd loves Bray, and I think they wanted to see him in that top spot. And now, again, he's just kind of hovering between places. Again, at this point in time, I think the Bellas are more relevant than he is, and that's sad. But it's just where we are. So I hope he can turn it around. And if he doesn't, well, then it'll just be another commentary where you and I harken back to what could have been with just the utmost depression. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So that's my first nitpick.